The Canadian Football League season began with 4 games over the weekend. Let's break them all down. And of course, you see the team behind me. I have to start with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They are 1-0 after a win over the Edmonton Elks, and I thought that that was a really strong game from Saskatchewan. And admittedly, I knew the result before I watched the game, so I didn't have the same ups and downs as fans watching that live would have had. But I thought this was a really great game, and I think particularly on the defensive side, you can see Mace's impact. Their tackling was great. They rallied to the football so well. There was a lot of speed on this defense, and they just swarmed the ball carrier so many times in that game. That was a really cool thing to see, because that to me is a hallmark of some strong defenses when you are able to do that. And then they came up with huge stops when they needed it to. Down by quite a few in the fourth quarter. The offense definitely showed up, for sure. But I thought it was the defense coming up with some big stops, coming up with some big plays, forcing some turnovers that allowed the Riders to get back into that game and eventually get the victory. It was the defense stepping up when they needed them to. Corey Mesa, I think, did a really good job. I didn't really notice anything that he did particularly wrong in this game or anything like that. There was talk about the discipline, and you get a dude who gets busted for popping a guy in the face. Seems fair. So that isn't ideal, but otherwise I thought discipline-wise they were pretty good. And then offensively, they had a few players step up. We said on here that this offense goes from good to great if Bain can really elevate his game. And boy, did he. Now, Schaefer Baker and Emilus didn't, but Bain was the star of this game from a Saskatchewan standpoint. That big play threat, he beat the DBs just straight a few times, and Harris was able to hit him. So you get that big play potential. And then when they needed kind of a security blanket or a safety blanket, it was Stearns who was the 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, 2nd and 6 guy. For Calgary fans, the old Markway McDaniel receptions. I think that is such an important part of this offense, and an important part of a Trevor Harris offense. Like they got the big plays, and those are great. You're not going to get them from that dude every week. You are going to need those drive extenders, and they had quite a few of those from Stearns. Schaefer Baker did what he does a couple of times, but he was kind of quiet, and I thought Emilus was really quiet too. But you had the big plays when you needed them from Stearns and from Bain to help carry the water on the offensive side. For the Edmonton Elks, I came away from this game feeling pretty good about this team and thinking that this was, like I said before, Edmonton is an improved football team from a year ago. We saw that in this game, and I think specifically on the defensive side, that their run D was dominant. AJ Ouellette got nothing in this game. This was a real strong argument for not paying running backs, because Ouellette was a non-factor in this football game, and that is what forced guys like Stearns and Baines to have to step up. But for 3 quarters, that put Saskatchewan behind the chains a lot. 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, even some 2nd and 11, 2nd and 12 situations, and Edmonton's defense was able to pin their ears back and make a few stops. So I thought they were good. Offensively, Lewis and Mayala came up with a few big plays when they needed them to, but when it came down to those winning plays, MBT just wasn't there. Macbeth did not necessarily step up. There was... It was a lack of execution on the Edmonton side, and I do think that can come. But this game was right there for them to have, and I think if I were to take the Rider glasses off for a second, I do think this game was more Edmonton losing it than Saskatchewan winning it. But Edmonton is an improved team in the West, that is for sure. Out east, the Montreal Alouettes pick up where they left off after a victory over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And this was a complete team effort. That defense is really good. Now, we'll see how they look like without Stubblefield, as he tore his ACL in that game. After just a really kind of dipshit play on Strevler where he gave him a bit of an ankle. Yeah. I didn't like that. That one bothered me a little bit. So, but aside from that, like, I thought that the defense still did a really, really good job of bottling up Caleros. That they gave him no time to do anything. They were in his face. They covered a really good receiving group really well. The only success Winnipeg was really able to have was when Oliveira got going. But no, that really got in the... I thought that really got into Winnipeg's way. And for the Bombers, they struggled. that this offense looked bad. Oliveira was kind of the only one getting going. And I think, honestly, a lot of it was on Collaros. This was a bad Zach Collaros game. There was a lot of receivers opened that he missed. There were decisions that he made that I didn't like. He played a poor football game, I think. And I think he'll bounce back. Like, I don't think, oh, well, Zach Collaros is cooked. The one thing I didn't like, they were bringing in Strevler a lot. And I get it's the new toy and you want everyone acclimated early on. But it was so clear Collaros' rhythm was off to start this game. And I'm not saying it was because Strevler was in there, but they kept pulling him in and out. And so it's tough to really get that rhythm going. They finally get it. At some points with Oliveira, but overall, this was not an in-sync offense, and that was, I think, a little frustrating on the Winnipeg side. Their defense is still quite good. That they have, I think, more than made up for the loss of Jeffcoat along that defensive line. But yeah, the offensive execution just needs to be, I think, substantially better going forward here for Winnipeg. Out in Calgary, I was at the game, so not the most detailed of notes, but I thought the Stampeders looked all right. Admittedly, those were, I thought, two of the least impressive teams I saw all weekend. Ottawa still to come on Thursday here against Winnipeg in week 2 as they get the bye to start the season. But like I didn't watch this Calgary-Hamilton game thinking, oh, watch out Saskatchewan, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and BC, or watch out Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. Here come these teams. I kind of just thought, well, we pitted two evenly matched teams against each other, and that's not a compliment to either of them. But a couple of things stood out for me. Calgary, I liked the defense quite a bit. I thought that they gave Bo Levi Mitchell a few problems in this one, and I think Bo gave himself some of those problems as well. But I thought defensively, Calgary looked really, really strong. I thought, like I said, these are two evenly matched teams. I don't think they were, actually. Just kind of going back on that now. I thought that I thought that Calgary was substantially better than Hamilton. I get the Ticats make the push late. Part of that is Calgary settling for field goals, and that is where they're going to need someone to step up. Like for Montreal, Philpott was the guy. For Calgary, I think they would like the other Philpott to be that guy and step up and turn some of those threes into sixes, and then you get a much more comfortable night at McMahon Stadium. But I thought Calgary was a substantially better team for the majority of this football game, and just Hamilton made a bit of a push to make it close. But I think banking on that for Hamilton going forward is a bit of fool's gold. And lastly, Toronto taking on BC. Toronto's defense was smothering, especially late in this game. Now, this is a relatively high-scoring game, but I loved how Toronto's defense played. I thought their secondary was great, and they were able to get such a pass rush on Vernon Adams, especially late in the game when Adams, like they are looking to push the ball downfield a little bit. So Adams is going to have to hold the ball for a beat or two longer. And then you get Oromalade. I'm going to say that right at some point this year, I promise. You get Saresna, who get all kinds of pressure. They had a couple other big boys on that defensive line come up with a few plays. And then Winton McManus, there's like 9 of them on the football field. He was tremendous. So I thought this defense was probably, even though they gave up a bunch of points, I thought this defense was probably the most impressive defensive unit that I saw in week 1 in the CFL. And then Kadeem Carey helped get Dukes in a bit of a rhythm. They went away from him for a bit, like, okay, let's get the quarterback going now. It's, well, you know what? Let's just keep factoring Carey into the run game a little bit more, because he was, I thought, their best player and stepped up in a big-time way. And of some of the new additions that we saw, I thought Carey had kind of the biggest impact offensively in week 1. On the BC side, I thought offensively they looked fine. Got to hold on to that football better. They had a few really key fumbles that kind of cost them and really let Toronto back into the game when it looked like the Lions were going to pull away from this one. Just a little bit sloppy with the football. And then defensively, they had some real troubles getting stops. And I think that they are going to notice the loss of Matthew Betts a little bit more than they were maybe anticipating. That there was a lot of room to run for Carey, and there wasn't a whole lot of contain on Dukes in big moments in this game. So that is something that I think is going to need to be addressed for BC if they are going to get to where everyone thinks that's going to be, and that is playing in the Grey Cup that they are hosting coming up in November. So an interesting week 1 in the CFL, to say the least.